All right, so hi everybody. Thank you for coming and meeting here to talk about your experience as a teacher and how you use Latin American knowledge in your practice with your classes, with your students. So before I just want we're each going to go through, you're going to tell a little bit about you, your personal story, how you got to where you are now, and then I do have some discussion questions at the end that we'll also touch on. So to start out, we have Sarah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I think you summarized it pretty well there on the slide. I'm Sarah Sleasman. I'm in my third year teaching at Cornell High School in Coraopolis, Pennsylvania. But I started out studying Spanish and linguistics at Pitt, and I was a certificate for Latin American studies as well, and Mandarin Chinese just for fun. But with CLAS, I got to go on 2 different study abroad trips. I also was an intern. I was one of Luis's original minions for Panoramas my senior year. And I've continued to travel and work in Latin America, and I bring that into the classroom as much as I can. I'm the singleton Spanish teacher at school, so I teach grades 8 through 12, all 4 levels. If they take Spanish, they get me, and I love what I do.
That's great. So have you ever done anything with that Chinese ever?
It served well for my other master's degree in linguistics. We had a lot of Chinese students that we were working with teaching English as a foreign language, or English as a second language, excuse me, for them. So I got to communicate a little bit, but outside of that and my summer job when I was in college giving directions occasionally, not too much.
Awesome. That's still really cool. Spanish and Chinese, you don't see that pairing too often. And also I wanted to ask, where did you travel to?
So with Center for Latin American Studies, I was part of the summer 2010 research field trip. We went to Rosario, Argentina, and we were there for 6 weeks. So that was my first experience, and that got me hooked. And then I suppose it was in collaboration with the center. I was part of the first group that went to Pitt in Ecuador to study Quechua for the summer. And you still, I believe, have the Quechua teacher on staff, Alana Deloge, and he was wonderful. So those were the 2 study abroad experiences. And then I've been volunteering as an interpreter for a mission group out of Johnstown in Lima, Peru every summer since 2010 as well. So except for last summer, I try to get down every year, and it's about a week-long trip. And we do we do construction for homes in the community. So it's a lot of fun. And I get to put to use skills that I don't use in my Spanish classroom for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess since you've been to so many places, you've been with people from so many places, what kind of Spanish accent do you have? And then which one do you teach the students?
So I remember specifically after the summer abroad in Argentina, I went back and met with my friends in Lima, and they said, "What happened to you? You are so messed up," because I was shushing all over the place. Maravilloso, right? You have to say it that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk back. That's all the love to all the people from Argentina out there. It's beautiful. But I had to retrain myself not to sound that way amongst the Peruvians. And so now I think probably because I've spent the most time in Peru, I forgot to mention I did a Fulbright, an English language teaching Fulbright in Puno, Peru, in the calendar year of 2014 as well, kind of in between undergrad and graduate work. And so I think that is the accent that I've most picked up on, and certainly the slang I know best. So that's
Nice.
why I always default. But
Yeah,
my students, I have many students who are coming to me from Guatemala, from Mexico, from Honduras. So they're teaching me all the time.
that's awesome. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. In how do you say Coraopolis? I never heard of it. Okay. So do you have a lot of heritage speakers in your classes? What is the demographic like there? Is it suburban, urban?
So it's very interesting. We're 8 miles from downtown Pittsburgh in Coraopolis. We're a very small public school district, only 500 kids in the whole district, pre-K through 12. So class sizes are very small. We're graduating a whole 42 this year, if they all
Oh,
make it. And my fingers are crossed that they will. They're a great group. But that means, on my best day, 15 is a large class. So that's very different from the city schools and the larger suburban districts around. But because of housing prices in our district and with the project going on at the cracker plant in Beaver County, we are seeing a large influx of workers, migrant workers that are coming for jobs, and they brought their families with them. So I do have at least two, again, in my very small classes, I have at least two heritage speakers in each class.
wow.
I'm seeing a lot of Brazilians coming. So I also have quite a few Portuguese speakers in my Spanish classes. And then of course our typical kids. So I would say we're 50-50 Caucasian, African-American for the
Great.
rest.
Yeah. Awesome. So at the end, I'm gonna ask everyone some more questions about how you decided to be a teacher, but this is a great background for you. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing.
Sure.
And we'll go to Zach. So Zach, tell me how you got to where you are now.
Yay, okay. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you and be surrounded by fellow Spanish educators. So I am not as seasoned. I'm not a veteran teacher. This is my first year teaching by myself. I actually just graduated last year, my student teaching. I also did the MAT at Pitt, class of 2020. So yeah, my educational background. So no, I'm a recent grad. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2019 in Spanish. I did a minor in secondary ed and a Portuguese minor as well. And CLAS has always had a super special place in my heart. I did one of the CLAS field trips in 2017, I think. I went to Valladolid in Mexico. And then 2 years later, I was the first, I don't know what you would call it, not mentor, but yeah, I guess a mentor to the students. I went down with the students. Sophia, is that what you would call me?
Yeah,
Mentor?
I can call it like TA.
Yeah,
TA, yeah.
yeah, like a TA for the class trip, which it was really great to do another class trip. We went to Manizales in Colombia, and I was like just in a different capacity. I was mentoring the students there who were doing their project, similar to what I did 2 years ago. So that was super special. I also did an education internship through CLAS too. So we visited like 10 to 12 middle and high schools and elementary schools actually around the Pittsburgh area. And I came in, I did some culture lessons on Day of the Dead in Peru and Brazil too. So that was super fun. CLAS has always been, a super special place in my heart. And then I did the 1-year master's at Pitt. That was a very intensive year and it was kind of cut short in March. Sophia knows this well. She was actually doing an internship with me. I was doing my student teaching at Pitt and then, things changed last March, but we graduated and we did it. And this is my first year teaching. When I was doing my student teaching, I did 10 Spanish 2. Spanish 2, 1 prep, and then this year I have all Spanish 1, but middle school. So I teach 7th and 8th graders. So I really like having 1 prep. I just do the same lesson like 5 times. That's kind of kept me a little bit sane. I can't even imagine having Spanish 1 through 4 and teaching all those preps. But it's definitely been different this year going from high school to middle school. I didn't think it was going to be that different, but it is very, very apparent that their, readiness levels are not there. And they need to be socially and emotionally met as well. I think that's the most important part. The thing I'm learning the most this year that the content, it does matter, but at the same time, it doesn't. They're going to always forget what I teach, but they're never going to forget how they feel in my room. So that social and emotional learning part is the biggest part of my teaching.
Yeah, and since I'm guessing it's their Spanish 1, right? So you're introducing them to Spanish. So does this feel like a big task for you? Like you're making a first impression on them, or how is it for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Since day one, so we started off fully remote this year. And then in November, we switched to hybrid and now we're fully back. I still have a couple of hybrid kids who decided to stay remote, but it's about 95% of our building is back. So we've had all 3 modes of teaching this year, and how to teach a foreign language in this environment is just completely mind-boggling. But yeah, especially Spanish 1, you want to get them in the door and make them inspired and want to continue taking the language. So I just try to fill my classroom every day with, fun, singing and dancing, and unfortunately no food this year, but really making that impression that languages matter. Yeah.
Awesome, great. And then the other question was kind of similar to what I asked Sarah, but with the school district that you teach in, what is it like? Is it different from where you grew up? Is it similar? What kind of demographic do you have there?
Yeah, so it's not that far away. So I'm originally from the Philly suburbs area. So it's about 45, Westchester's about 45 minutes from where I live right now. So the commute, it's a little far, but it's manageable. But it's a suburban environment. I think I have about 2 heritage speakers total out of my 120 students.
Yeah.
So the Latino population is not huge at all, but there are many Indian families. There are many African American families in our area. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, do you think that the small presence of Latinx populations makes people less encouraged to learn Spanish, or does it not make much of a difference?
So I teach 4 seventh grade classes, which is their first year of a language.
Yeah.
And so these are the students who are like, yes, I'm ready to switch out of reading. Like, we got it. I'm ready to take on a language. So I would say it's most of your like highly motivated students who the families and the kids are like ready for a different challenge. And so they're so motivated and so excited to be doing a different class and kind of breaking off from their peers. The foreign language is the first time that it's like a different class from everybody else.
It's like a choice you get to make. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, choice in their learning. And it's definitely evident. Yeah, they're super motivated and engaged.
That's awesome. Great. Great. Thank you, Zach.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing everything. And we'll go over to Luke. So yeah, Luke, give us an introduction to you. Who are you? Why do you like to teach? Everything.
I guess my path would be unorthodox, would be the way that I would describe it. No aspirations ever to be a teacher. I graduated with anthropology, environmental studies, and I met someone that was really interested in Spanish as a sophomore, and she convinced me to go for the CLAS certificate, and I was able to study abroad. So I failed Spanish in high school, no desire to deal with Spanish. I ended up taking Spanish 2, 3, and 4 at Pitt, and it's kind of a big deal if you do that because Spanish 1 and 2 are 5 credits at Pitt, so it's a big deal to to kind of start over. But because of that, I was able to study abroad in Chile my senior year, which was pretty cool. So I guess after that, I moved to Denver. I was in Denver for a while. I was in DC. I was doing environmental jobs. And I think teaching first started dawning on me when I signed my first contract in DC, and they said, for every month that you work, you earn half a personal day. And I started thinking, we grew up used to the school calendar. We're like,
Yeah.
half a day Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Thursday, Friday off. So I guess I kind of had that going. I started to kind of see the value in teaching. I started to kind of recreate. So for those, I've always been kind of intrigued by people that feel like they can go teach high school when they're 22 years old. For me, I was like, I'm right there. Those kids are, we're almost peers at that point. So I kind of took a detour. I met someone from Mexico. I moved to Mexico. I spent about 2.5 years in Mexico and met my wife who's from Mexico. And then we came back, and I was really interested in a job that would allow me to see my in-laws every summer. So teaching seemed like a great fit. I had to explain, healthcare in the United States. So I figured a teacher is a good job to get healthcare. For those of you that are good friends with people from another country, the price of college, going back to graduate school, that's a big conversation with someone coming from, particularly from Latin America, where my wife studied nutrition, and she did an internship for a year after she graduated, and they paid for her school. So I was able to come back. I did the MAT. I did the MAT at the age of 27. So I was in with people like Zach, and it was super cool again, because I'm like, I was the guy that was asking all the questions, and Zach would have been like, hey, just get Luke to ask it. Because I was like, asking these questions. And it was a really great experience. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I can really connect. One of my opening lines from Spanish is, I'm from Altoona, PA. The first time I heard Spanish, I was 17 years old. I failed Spanish 3, and now I'm a Spanish teacher, and my wife's from Mexico, and da 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 da. So
Wow.
we don't know where we're going. But I guess something else that was really cool is I ended up getting a job at Beaver area high school and middle school, where
Yeah.
I got to work with my mentor teacher, Jason Hank, who you'll hear from here in a little bit. But what was really cool is, and not to give away Jason's bio, he'll love to tell you about it. But Jason's coming from like a really, really linguistic. He knows everything. And I came in here with like, I kind of picked it up on the go. I remember when I was in Chile, one of the first words I learned in Spanish was mostaza, because I'm like, no mostaza. Not really a problem in Chile. There's not a ton of that, but I remember just trying to learn it very organically. So when I really, really enjoyed teaching, and for those of you that are kind of singletons or whatnot, Jason and I always talked about, wouldn't it be so cool if we could take students that learn how Jason best teaches and students that learn how I best teach and kind of put them in these different groups. We kind of get that with math and science and reading and English throughout our, I like English. I love this teacher. I didn't like that teacher.
Yeah.
But I think one of the joys for me is really as a Spanish teacher is, we have so many kids that start in Spanish 1, and then by the time they get to Spanish 4 and AP, we have like 10.
Yeah.
If we were as Spanish teachers to look at those numbers, we'd probably stop teaching. We'd just be like, it's not worth it. But as I always say, kids have 13 years of math, and not all of them are engineers, and not all of them. So one of my real highlights as a teacher is just getting kids familiar with the idea that not everyone lives like we do in the US and just kind of different cultures. So I have a lot of fun with that. It's very interesting. My wife always comes in, and for many students, it's the first time they meet someone from Latin America. So if you think, Zach, that you have a big responsibility introducing them in Spanish, I say, Laura, you are the voice of Latin America to, all these 14-year-olds in Shaler. So it's a great experience. I think that teaching's, wonderful profession. And if I had to give one piece of advice just to future teachers, and maybe I'm taking Sophia, one of your first questions.
No, that's great. Go ahead.
I would definitely encourage people who are thinking about teaching to just say, teach for 10 years. Teach for 10 years. That's it. See how you feel after 10 years. And maybe you want to try something different. So my thought is always, at 22 to think I want to be a teacher for 35 years, do that. It's pretty daunting. So I would say, I would encourage people to give it a try, see what they think. Yeah. And I think you can make a big impact. And I think in particular, if as I've learned that it's fun to focus on Sarah Star and Pura Para, but man, when you tell the kids like the noise that a chicken makes in Mexico and the noise that a dog makes, that's when they really start to connect, and that's when they really start to ask questions. So I think there's a huge cultural opportunity, considering I'm a BA in anthropology, and last time I checked, anthropology isn't being offered at too many high schools throughout the state. So I really cherish the opportunity, and I'll just kind of echo what Zach said. Zach, I have spicy fruit Fridays before COVID. And I'm not sure if you've ever had like tahine, which is like a Chilean. Yeah. So I tell the kids, bring in a Tupperware, and I have fresh limes, and I have a squeezer and the tahine. Zach, they love it. I would encourage you to go get.
I'm gonna do that, because I have some like literally in my desk at school.
Yeah. And so now they're excited about pineapple and apples, and you'd be surprised how many kids have never had a mango and stuff like that, and they're bringing it in. So I do really echo Zach, and I hope, Zach, that you stick it out, because I'm sure the opportunities will continue to increase as we're able to kind of do more and more things as we hopefully are moving forward.
Well, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love your outlook on not all kids are going to be so interested, but you got to make it what it is. Just like not all kids are interested in science, but you still give them that opportunity, like to get their feet wet, So that's awesome. Wonderful. Sorry, I was muted. Okay, Nicole, go ahead, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Like Luke, I would say I went an unorthodox route to get to teaching. So I'm with you on that. I started with Latin in middle school, and I took Latin 1 and 2. And right before my 10th grade year was about to start, I got a phone call from the school office saying, sorry, Nicole, you can't take both Latin and orchestra. And I was like, there goes Latin, right? And I begrudgingly took Spanish, and I ended up loving it. And I loved my teacher. He was fabulous, and got to Pitt and tested out of Spanish. And I was like, woohoo, I don't need to take Spanish ever again. And then I was like, well, I kind of miss it. And my aunt told me about her study abroad experiences in Madrid. And my aunt is like a big sister to me. So that was it. I was like, I need to get back into Spanish. This is crazy. I need to go somewhere. I need to visit Spain. And so I did. And in my junior year, I got to study in Sevilla, and, never wanted to look back. My father was like, you are coming home, right? Eventually. And so that was, of course, a wonderful experience. And while I was there, I met future teachers, right? And they were like, oh, can't wait to be a Spanish teacher. And I was like, oh, have fun. That'll be great. I'm not going to be a Spanish teacher. I had my heart set on being a youth director, right? Like a faith-based youth director. And I did that for about 2 decades, and did a little bit of tutoring or substitute teaching on the side. And then eventually found myself in a school year where I was this long-term sub. I started as a long-term sub, and then they hired me half-time for the rest of the year because they were like, we love you, we need you to stay. And I was like, okay. So, and I was young and not married and no kids yet, so that was a little easier. I could never do that now, 2 big jobs like that. Anyway, I loved it. And so that just got me thinking, as I just kept going through the next stage of my life, hey, I would love to be in the classroom, and I'd still be working with kids and just encouraging them. And just ran into so many kids who felt like they couldn't learn Spanish. They couldn't do it. They weren't smart enough. It was too hard. A lot of them started later, right? Like high school, the kids who don't start until 9th grade, it's a lot harder for them to learn, I think, at that point.
Exactly.
Anyway, so a roundabout way to get there. So at Pitt, I did study religious studies, focused on Christianity. My secondary focus was Middle Eastern religions. And then really, it's funny because I did this minor in Spanish, again, not thinking I was ever going to teach. And they told me, they were like, hey, Nicole, so you can do this study abroad experience, but one of your credits won't transfer back to Pitt. And I was like, oh, that doesn't matter. And then of course I found out that 1 credit would have helped me to be a double major, right later on. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. But anyway, so I taught in different places, and then eventually shifted away from youth director work into teaching as my main gig. And I ended up teaching preschool through high school at different points, and have settled in on middle school right now at Winchester Thurston, and just am very grateful to be there. I love working with middle school students. I actually have 2 middle school boys right now, so we're all middle school all the time in my house. So when you all were talking before about that, was that Zach talking about the social emotional learning? I am living that everywhere right now. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say some people would be repulsed by that. Like you said, I'm living middle school all around
all
me.
the time. I can't get away from it.
That's good.
Right, for better or for worse. But I have the privilege at Winchester Thurston, because I teach them from 6th through 8th grade. I only really have to cover Spanish 1 in those 3 years. What? Yeah. So I have this awesome privilege of getting to take my time and getting to kind of choose how I do that. And so what I would say about how I teach about Latin America is this. I have been teaching through stories, mostly with pop-up grammar, instead of the other way around, grammar first and then some stories. And as I have made that shift just over the past few years, so I'm not an expert by any means, what I have enjoyed is finding stories, short novels, right, that take place in a Latin American country. And sometimes they're fiction and sometimes they're nonfiction, but that just allows me the opportunity to jump into a little bit of geography, a little bit of history, right? Before the novel, during the novel, after the novel. And so, for example, my 6th graders right now are reading this adorable little novel about a girl who tries to kidnap a howler monkey in Costa Rica, right? And so obviously that's like sort of a silly story, but it does touch on, you know, what do you do when you run into an animal in the wild, right? What's best for the animal? But in really simple, short and sweet Spanish sentences that they can understand even in 6th grade. And my 7th graders are doing a book that takes place in Spain, but my 8th graders are learning about Felipe Alou, right? The baseball player, now a manager, right? Or was a manager and still alive today. So they are reading a biography in Spanish, simple terms, right? Mostly present tense, some past tense. They're still getting some grammar in there. They're learning a little bit of the difference between preterite and imperfect, getting them ready for upper school Spanish. So some of my students in 8th grade are looking at next year, jumping right into Spanish 2 in 9th grade, which is great. And I have a few who are actually going to jump into Spanish 3. They actually tested in Spanish 3. So I'm like, woohoo. Yeah, I know. The little joys, right? That just makes your
that's great.
semester, basically, when you hear that. But basically just reading those stories. And like I said, I get to make fun slideshows with volcanoes in Costa Rica. And we get to discuss, you know, would you like to go there and that sort of thing. But again, my background is I was in Spain and I visited Mexico a couple of times and still in touch with my friends from that experience. I took a group of high school students through a church to do a mission trip in Mexico. And it really hit me when you asked before, Sophia, you asked somebody else what their accent is, right? And what they teach their students. Well, obviously I really learned to speak when I was in southern Spain, right? But then I go to Mexico and then I come back and I start watching Mexican TV. So it just blew, you know, my accent out. But I love it. And I tell my students, I'm teaching you basically Castilian, right? Teaching you Spain, Spanish. However, we still incorporate different words from Latin America, the different countries, and say, look, if you go to Latin America, you know, you're not going to say this word the same way. And so I really try to bring that in so that they know, you know, I don't want them to be so narrow-minded. I'm trying to bring up global citizens, right? And so whenever I can, I try to work in words that you can find when you're in different countries. So I hope that helps. I also do pen pals with students in Ecuador with my 8th graders, and they actually are doing Zoom exchanges now, which is phenomenal, right? That they even feel comfortable doing that. So I would be happy, Sophia, if at another point, if you run into other aspiring teachers, if they want to talk about that, I would be happy to talk with them.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that what you were saying about the books, like imagine being in 7th grade, you're just starting Spanish, but you're able to say, I could read a book, or like I was read part of a book. I read a chapter in Spanish. Like just the way you feel like you can do something, or having those pen pals on Zoom, the Zoom pals. Like I can have a conversation with someone in Spanish. Like that's empowering. And I think that's great just to give them those experiences so that you're empowered, you're ready to complete more things. So great. Thank you, Nicole. That was awesome. Really interesting. And I believe we just have one more. Jason, yes, please share with us.
I'm going to read my resume so I don't repeat too many things. My name is Jason Hank, and I came to teaching in a very orthodox manner, probably a manner that doesn't really exist to many people. I knew at age 17 that I wanted to be a Spanish teacher. It was the year was 1996 and the Olympics were but it was 1996. And it was the one thing in high school that I was good at. It was the one thing that I was better than everybody else. I actually, Luke said he failed Spanish in high school. I got a C in Spanish 1. And then in the next year, we got a new Spanish teacher, and I had him for like 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is in 1995, I think it was, right? And then fast forward, he came to my house for lunch last week, and he lives in Hershey, PA, right? So like, it was just kind of funny that had happened recently, but it just, because of him, I found this new desire to learn language. And this is like pre-internet kind of, you know? And
Yeah.
so I remember we listen to a lot of music in my classes. And so kids today, I mean, you can Spotify, YouTube, you can find music anywhere. I remember borrowing Café Tacuba Re, the CD from my teacher, and then recording it on tape and then listening to it over and over and over again. Like that's how it took a lot of work to get music. This is, you know, the internet was in its infancy, so like Google Translate, things like that didn't exist. Luke had said that, you know, he's from Altoona. I'm from Linesville, Pennsylvania, which is about 2 hours north of Pittsburgh. It's very rural. It's between Pittsburgh and Erie. My hometown has one stoplight in it. And so here I am, a kid that is from a very rural, predominantly white area with, I think I knew one Susie Jerome, who worked at Hollywood Video in downtown Linesville, was from Puerto Rico. And I actually would go talk to her in Spanish when I was like in 10th grade, just to practice with somebody. I was that desperate to learn more and try to find any opportunity. So that I knew then, like I'm good at this. I like this. And then also teaching sounds kind of fun. I mean, we don't go into teaching. If you go into teaching because you're looking for summers off and that's your sole purpose, you will likely burn out of teaching very quickly, right? You have to love what you're doing and love kids and love your subject matter. And then that's the benefit. You can have your summers off. But I'm a helpful person, and so I figured this would be a good fit. So I went to Slippery Rock University, majored in Spanish. I was in Valladolid, Spain for a semester. I did the Camino de Santiago when I was there. In fact, I have I'll spare everyone like taking my shirt off, but I have the La Cruz de Santiago tattooed to my arm when I was 25. So it's a really special experience for me. But I graduated from college in 2002 and just interviewed like heck that summer, like everywhere across the state of Pennsylvania. And I had actually even taken a job near Mechanicsburg, and I was going to move out east where I don't have any family or friends. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was just really eager to get a job anywhere, and then we'll figure it out from there. And so I got a call late that summer from Beaver Area School District, and I've worked there since then. So this is my 19th year. This is my 19th year. So again, that's very, I guess, the traditional, you think like I graduated from high school, I went to college for 4 years, I got a job at 22, and I'm still at that job. I would imagine I plan to stay there. I like being there. It's a great thing. I teach, I've taught all these levels of Spanish. I don't currently teach 1, 3, 4, and AP, but those are the classes that I've taught before. I currently teach 1 in middle school. So I have 7th and 8th graders, mostly 7th graders, and then like juniors and seniors. And so I actually really like that, because the younger ones are nuts and they'll try anything and they're fun and they're still like teacher pleasing, and, you know, like they're really a lot of fun to be around. And then the AP kids they're Spanish nerds and they love linguistics and they love culture, and they just like sit there and they're mesmerized when you tell them about when I was 22 and I was traveling. And so you could tell like the wheels are spinning. So
yeah, their interest level is higher. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how does this rope in with the technology and the coding? Did you also study that, or it was?
Well, yeah, in some ways. So I graduated from high school in 1998. So like the World Wide Web came into existence and then was something we had while I was in high school. My sister graduated in 1994, and she's kind of like, okay, boomer with technology, right? And I came of age during the birth of the internet. So I guess for the longest time, I was always like the nice young guy that could help you with your computer, you know? And then that kind of morphed into, and you know, anyone that works at a small school district knows that like a lot of people wear a lot of different hats, right? But then it turned into, when I went to Robert Morris, I took a lot of, all of my electives were in technology. And then I eventually went back to get my certificate in educational tech. According to the state of Pennsylvania, I'm an educational technology expert, right?
Wow, expert.
According to a lot of people I know, I don't think they would say that, but anyway, at the time too, we were coming like around 2010, 2011. The schools were moving towards like being a one-to-one iPad or one-to-one Chromebook district. So you need a lot more people to support that. And so I became what we like they gave me like 1 period a day to help people, and now it's turned into half of the day. I'm a technology coach. So I help people with everything, just like how do I print to how do I incorporate this into the LMS and the workflow of this assignment and you know, and it's nice because I'm still a classroom teacher, so I can kind of test those things out. And when I say what works or doesn't work, you know, there's people have a lot more faith, and it's not just the theory of it's going to work. I can tell you the problems I ran into and so forth.
Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, in the state of Pennsylvania, that also qualifies me to teach coding classes, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's the same. This is the same state that certifies people that teach history that can also teach psychology. For whatever reason, that's a thing in
I
Pennsylvania.
had a teacher that taught both, actually.
And that's why, yeah. So, but anyway, that's where that came in. I was just good at technology, and there was a need in my district, and I had an interest. And so that's advice I would give to people. I mean, there's a veteran teacher very early in my career. I was very enthused about Spanish, and we only had 1 through 4. And I was interested in maybe starting an AP program. And some of the other teachers were like, I think kind of discouraging me, because they maybe saw as like, well, then everyone will want to take Spanish, right? So, but I went, and I remember the veteran teacher told me, it was Greg, by the way, Luke, if you're curious, he's like, Jason, make your own path. Then you get to teach what you want, right? Like if you make the class, you get to teach it. And then you get the kids that you want, you get the program you want. And so now I don't say that like, I only want to teach the kids that I like, right? But if you start something that didn't exist before, then you get to call the shots. And I really enjoy that.
That's really cool. That's great. I was going to ask you about, now I forgot the question, but it was about the middle school, like the location of the middle school and the high school. Is it both in one?
Well, it's the middle school. I mean, and this is overly reductive. The middle school is essentially a hallway in the secondary campus, right? So it's one building, and 7th and 8th grade is in one hallway, and they cross over for like foreign language, and some of them might take algebra or
So it's
art,
a pretty
music, things like that.
small, it's a small district. Yeah.
Yeah, we graduate about 120 kids a year.
Okay.
So moderately sized.
Yeah. And so do they have a lot of access to Spanish speakers around them?
Not really. I mean, so I noticed one of the questions you're asking, like, how many do you have very many heritage speakers? And I would say like we have one every other year, it seems, right? Or one every year and a half or so on average. There was a young lady, the most recent, the young lady from El Salvador, and you know, we really enjoy, like I loved having her in my Spanish 3 class, and the kids talking to her. And one of the things that we did, I remember, is because she would help them with pronunciation and some of the projects they were doing. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice for the kids? I got these phonics books like that my son had when he was learning to read, you know, like SH and R blends or whatever. And then I got the kids, this is all voluntary. I got the kids to record themselves reading the phonics books. And then I made a folder in Google Drive and then shared it with Diana. And I gave her the books. And I said, so you can, because she when she arrived, she didn't speak any English, right? So like, if this helps, and plus it's like these kids that you help, this is them helping you. So I thought that was.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I've definitely heard about putting the heritage speaker on the spot in a classroom is kind of, you don't really want to do that, but I think it's a mutual relationship, you know. That's cool.
Yeah. And I did make that. There was a young lady from Colombia one time, and she even said, like, can you quit like running things past me in front of everybody? Like bad. I shouldn't have done that, but you know. But when you are really obsessed with the way things are said, why things, it's like you'll ask everybody. Like those of you that are associated with the center or have been through the center, my wife is Luz Amanda Hank, and she just about divorced me in the summer of 2006 when I was developing the Spanish AP Spanish curriculum, because like, well, why do you say, we'll say it like that, but that's not what I said. Now, but see, but why did you use that word? Could you use that word instead? You know, that
Yeah,
does not,
like-
that's another thing. Like if you, those of you that are aspiring to be a language teacher and you marry someone whose first language is language that you want to teach, like leave them the hell alone most of the time with stuff.
Yeah, she's probably sick of you. I mean, she's here. She could
Yeah,
have.
she is sick of me. That's why I'm in the basement and she's upstairs.
Oh my gosh. Okay, awesome. So thank you everyone for sharing. We can move to some of these discussion questions. And for this part, I'm just going to ask the question and then whoever wants to answer can chime in. So I guess we kind of already did this first one. But if anyone still wants to say, like, why did you decide to become a teacher? Was it just because of interest or of some other goal? So if anyone has anything to add. No? Okay, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
So I don't know if I might be the earliest here. I knew I wanted to be a Spanish teacher in 8th grade after my first year of Spanish 1. So I think that's also the year that I started, that I came out. And so I think after that, I was realizing like, oh, wow, it was just my district. And of course, when you're growing up, that's all you really know, just like your district and the people around you. But like, I was like, I don't think I know any single queer educator has ever been in this building. So I think that was one of the main reasons I wanted to be a teacher, is to have that queer representation in a classroom. And that's especially prevalent now. You know, just hanging the gay pride flag, hanging the Black Lives Matter flag, and showing kids that like, oh, there's also queerness in Latin America and like Latinx movements and using E as, you know, as the, you can, you know, switch words with E so they don't have to be as gendered.
Yes, using the robot, using all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I think that Jason said something similar about knowing that you wanted to be a teacher since you kind of started the language. Do you think that your interest has like waned at all? Or is it your interest that kind of keeps you going?
So I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about teaching is that, you know, you are teaching kids at the end of the day, you're not teaching Spanish. And so if you say you teach Spanish, like, I don't believe you. At the end of the day, you teach kids, you teach like adolescents who are maturing. And so I think at the end, you know, at first I came in here like, I'm going to speak 100% Spanish. I'm blah, 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 blah. Like they're, you know, they're going to get all this input. They're going to be obsessed. They're going to love it as much as I did. And at the end of the day, you might get 1 or 2 kids who really hook onto you. Like, yes, all the way. I'm going to take this all the way. And then you get a lot who won't buy into your program that you're selling. I call it the pony show every day. I do it. I show up with my pony show, like my llamas, my hats, the dance, and some kids won't buy into that, and that's okay. But I think that, you know, like yes, you're teaching the language, but you're teaching it to children, and they're all over the place mentally. So at the end of the day, you know, yes, you may love the language and the culture, and of course you're imparting that onto your kids, but you're also sharing with them, like you're teaching morals and skills and all of it.
Yeah, so it's more than just the language. Yeah. And I know, Jason, you took off your microphone. I don't know if you had something to add too.
Yeah, I actually want to say I want to correct what I said earlier. Because I want to one up Zach. I knew I wanted to teach Spanish when I was in 7th grade. I meant to say, not when I was
okay. Yeah.
No, I like what he said about, yes, it is children that you teach, right? Because that's what keeps me interested in it. Is I like young people. They're fun. They trends and vocabulary that they use or the style of their clothes changes, but kids don't change, right? The curiosity is there, their emotional state, and you know, being patient with that, and their you know, naivete. That those kids are the same as they've always been, and that's fun to be around. It's a very special thing. I would even say it's a sacred thing to be able to earn a kid's trust and watch them grow, and know that, you know, you take some pride, like I did that, like I helped her discover that, but also very humbly say, like, I had good material with you. You may, you know, so thank you for thanking me, but you made it easy. Or, you know, we had that breakthrough when I caught you cheating, and it really made me proud. I was even prouder of you after you admitted it and we dealt with it. You know, there's those experiences that you have. So there's something else too about, I think also, you know, because I'm nearing 20 years of teaching. Those of you aspiring teachers that may or may not be listening to this, you know, my first couple of years of teaching, I was insecure and I always thought like I wasn't working hard enough, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna get fired, and you know, what I'm, you know, and I don't have any younger siblings, and I hated kind of the middle school kids like my first year or so, until I really understood like, oh wait, you know, harness this, don't be annoyed by it. And then like you know, the next couple 5 or 6, 7 years of teaching, you really kind of get your feet underneath of you, and the program started, and you've seen the product of you know, the first kids you had all the way through. You know, the first 8th graders I had became the first AP class, became the first class of kids I ever took to Spain. And so that, and those are relationships. Like I went to my wife and I went to one of their weddings. We moved a friend to Michigan and stayed in one of their houses. You know what I mean? So you form these relationships with people, and you know, they're like in their almost 30 and they still call me Mr. Hank. So I think what I don't know. I think one of the question was like, what keeps you going? You know, I have to agree with Zach. It's just a love of kids. But at the same time, advice that I have is love your subject matter and know everything there is to know about it. That's the goal. I mean, you may never achieve it, right? But my belief is somebody should be able to open a book or a news article or website that's in Spanish and point to anything. And my job should be, I should be able to tell you what it means and why it's said that way and how you could say it differently. I might not always be able to do that quickly, but if that's my goal, and I can also use metaphors and make it fun and interesting for you to understand, then fine. But like, that's the standard that I should hold myself to. So if you're looking to be a teacher, that's, I think, the standard you should hold yourself to.
Yeah. And that way you never stop learning either. You know, every day you're learning something new too. I'm assuming if you're trying to know everything there is to know.
I got there last week, so I learned everything there is to know about Spanish, like last Wednesday. So it is getting kind of boring now.
Oh, all right. Well, awesome. So the next one, if anyone has any advice that you would still want to share to people who want to be a teacher, maybe haven't made the decision, what advice do you have?
My piece of advice would be to ask to teach upper levels of Spanish. I was lucky enough that I went in and Jason was like, you're going to teach 1, 2, and 4. So when I first went in, and while it was 3 preps, and while I totally get the idea of 1 prep, I really, really wanted to give everything to 1 and 2 after I saw what they would do in 4. I mean, 4, I'm teaching, you know, subjunctive with adverbial clauses. I'm teaching all this stuff. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to teach, you know, Sarah for, you know, 4 weeks here. So I would say some advice in there. And I know it's typically what we see is, you know, the longer a teacher's there, they get, you know, they tend to get the upper levels, and that tends to be what I see. My advice would be just to ask. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. Obviously, sometimes they're separated by different schools and middle schools, but I think that's really cool to see what they're doing in the upper levels, because I think that really allows you not to take for granted or to re-energize you with, especially if you're teaching the lower levels.
Yeah, that's great. No, I'd never heard that one before, so great. Anyone else have any pieces of advice?
I would piggyback off of what Luke just said. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You know, except I've always taught level 1. It seems like, and this was even before I became a Spanish teacher, I was teaching English as a second language, and I would always get level 1. And I was told because I was very patient. And it does take some of that. And some days, as everyone has said, it is draining because 8th grade energy sometimes is a lot, especially when you have maybe, and this happened to me last year, I had 30 8th graders in one class. They decided to put the whole group into one period. And I usually left the room thinking I was the worst teacher in the world. But, you know, those kids have come to Spanish 2, and the things they're doing now because they were interested in Spanish 1, and the motivation that's there now is really encouraging. So just hold on to that. I absolutely, I'm surprised when they mention, oh, hey, remember that game we played? Hey, remember that activity we did? That's what made me want to take the class. And then they bring in things that they found on their own, like, oh, hey, over the summer, there's this new restaurant that opened up and my family went and I could read the menu, all those little things. And going back to something Nicole said earlier about books too, we read a small, very, very small basic novel in Spanish 1 last year, even through the pandemic. And they were so proud of the fact that they were able to do that digital reader, you know, when we weren't able to meet in person. So holding on to those little gains, it gets you through the tougher days. And certainly then it's cool. I think I'm the only one on here now that's doing all 4 levels, but Jason, you kind of get to see the bookends, but it's cool to watch them as they grow. And then Luke, as you said, you see them grow and you know what their potential is. Some days they frustrate me because I know their potential and I know they're not reaching it. But Zach, as you said too, then you also recognize they are growing humans and they're developing. And, you know, it's just so cool to see them accomplish something they didn't think they could do. I realized I did not give my story, and it's the quick elevator speech. I was like, Jason, 7th grade, 13. I was good at Spanish. I thought I'd be terrible. I thought it would be the one thing that would wreck me. Books had always been my game. I'm not an athlete, but I ended up loving it. And here I am living the dream. But I realized not everybody's that way. And I remind the kids all the time, only in the United States of America is being bilingual considered a sign of intelligence and not simply a life skill. So you communicate, you win. And so I remind them when they get frustrated because, oh, I didn't do this exactly right, or maybe my pronunciation was off. It's okay, you're learning. And I'm learning every day too with you. So little pieces of advice maybe to hang on to.
Yeah, and what you said about the gain, you called them little gains, but to me I think that's so important. Being able to read a menu, like that sounds like a big thing to me. Even if it's just one student who gets something out of it. My dad told me once, I'm a Zumba teacher, and he said, even if just one person shows up to the class, you still teach with the same energy, like, you know? So to me, I love what you said. Thank you for sharing. And Nicole, were you going to add something too?
Yes, just along those lines, advice for someone thinking about being a teacher: be ready to not give up on the kids, because some of them are going to get it right away, as was said earlier. Some of them aren't going to get it until 2 years after they've had your class. And so, and some of them are going to shut down and you're not going to know why, right? And so if you feel like a student or 2 or 3 aren't getting it, or they aren't making progress, don't be discouraged. And we all know we're not supposed to take it personally, right? But don't be discouraged. And it may not be about your teaching skills, right? And there is one way to deal with that. Check in with that student. Have a, low risk check-in with that student, right? In a way that's comfortable to that student. So it's obviously helpful if you know them a little bit first. Some students are okay if you are speaking to them in the hallway super quickly without a bunch of people around. Other students would be mortified if you said, hey, stay after class, I just want to check in with you. But that would be my advice. Make that part of your classroom culture. Say, I'm going to check in with you, just so you know. Sometimes we're just going to do a quick check-in during class on Zoom or in a breakout room. And other times I'm going to say, hey, stay for 30 seconds after class. I have a quick question for you. Doesn't mean you're in trouble. Doesn't mean you failed an assessment, right? It's actually a positive thing. when I want to check in with you, and check in and say, hey, how's it going? I noticed you weren't really into what we were doing today. Anything going on? Anything I can help you with? You know, can I hook you up with a homework buddy or a note-taking buddy or whatever? Just be prepared to not give up on them, because there are going to be times where you're going to feel like you hit it out of the park. And there are going to be other times where you're going to say, half of my class was not paying attention today. What did I do? Just be ready for that, and don't let it discourage you, and stay in touch with other foreign language teachers, right? Whether it's in person, on Zoom, Facebook, whatever, because that's going to keep you going when you're having a tough time.
Great. Yeah, no, that's amazing, guys. Thank you for your words of wisdom, jewels of wisdom. So we'll move on. I know we already talked about some challenges, but just these last two questions, I'm actually even kind of more interested in the last question. What other aspects of Latin American studies have been relevant to you? Or what other challenges haven't we talked about that could be relevant for aspiring teachers to know? So if you want to answer either of these questions, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd actually love to talk about the Latin America thing. So I feel like this is a very common journey for many people, many of the educators here as well. When we were learning Spanish in middle school and high school, it can be a very whitewashed language, especially when a lot of your teachers only went to Spain, teach you the vosotros, and like, I don't know about you guys, I learned nothing about Latin American like cultures other than like the short tidbits of culture knowledge that really isn't culture. It's a mythos of culture in your textbook. That's not culture. So when the first time I really started learning about Latin America is in college through CLAS. And so I feel like the biggest parts of my curriculum now is like, I'm going to teach you about the Black Palenqueras in Colombia, or I'm going to teach you about I don't call it Columbus Day anymore, but Indigenous Peoples Day. We learned a couple words in Quechua and Maya because of the places that I've been. So I think incorporating like Indigenous culture as well, that's so common in so many Latin American cultures, but you never hear about it in school because it's so whitewashed. So I think just, diversifying the curriculum a lot and just not making it so rigid and Spain focused, because, that's not the only country that speaks Spanish. So that's another big thing about us being as Spanish teachers, is that we have this huge, 21 countries speak Spanish. So we have this, how do we represent all of them to our kids? And like, how do we tell them, you can, use Mexican accent one day if you want, and then like the regionalisms of Puerto Rico the next day if you want, because language is fluid and it's ever changing and it's dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who don't know that Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Like, people grew up not knowing that. So yeah, exactly. Just exposing them to all of the diversity that is Latin America. It's not one stereotype. It's not Spain,
Not just tacos.
Not just tacos. Yeah. Yes, that's awesome. Anyone else?
And along those lines of it, like not just teaching Spain, I was looking at a map, and apparently there's a new Mexico now. I don't know if you guys knew this. I saw this in the southwest part of our country. There is a new Mexico. So I'll have to bring that up with my kids. It's funny when I say stuff like that, because no, really, other than Luke, nobody knows me here. So like, this guy's a moron. Other than language, the other aspects of Latin America. So I'm married to Luz Amanda. She's from Colombia. You'd asked that earlier about like what accent do I speak with? Mine is maybe a Paisa accent from Medellin, and I'm really proud of that. When I first met Luz, I had just gotten back from going to grad school for a summer in Spain, and I spoke with a Castilian accent. She made fun of me. So, and like really like gave me, just whatever. So I'm kind of like a tape recorder. I'll pick up, I think Sarah had mentioned something about being in Argentina for a little bit and then shoot, so that happens. But the aspects of Latin America that I use in my class, like being married to someone from Latin America, and then having nieces and nephews and family members and brother-in-law whose homes I visited, who have come to visit us, so using, I guess I like to paint picture. I even say stuff to my kids like, I know this sounds silly, but now that you've been taking Spanish for a couple months, you should say we. Do they say in Spanish? Do we say in Spanish, right? Like, because you're a Spanish speaker now, because you told me that you like to go to the movies. So now you said, me gusta ir al cine. You're a Spanish speaker now, right? So I tease myself, like, let's stop saying they. Do they say? No, do we say? And I'm very conscious of that. Like, I don't want to co-opt, Colombian culture, right? But like, I don't say things like, in Colombia, we, right? Like, I will say, like, in Colombia, my family does these things. But it's important for me that they know that, like, my family in Colombia isn't a they, it's just my other part of my family, right? And that Spanish is a part of my everyday life. And so whatever the topic is, there's pictures or a time. Oh, one time my nephew said, or my brother-in-law and I were. So I try to bring the everyday life of Latin America into my classroom to see that to normalize it, I guess, and to show kids that it's not exotic. It's my life. That's my nephew. That's
exactly. Yeah. People feel removed from it as if they're not part of it.
Right.
And it's really so close, and getting involved is, like, hey, you might end up with a wife or husband that speaks Spanish. So
right. Or a really good friend, or something. And I try to stress to the students that, like, Spanish is we use Spanish to make people laugh and to comfort people when people cry. Like, there's funny things you can say in Spanish and mean things you can say in Spanish. It's not just as Zach referred to as the whitewash version. I would refer to it as like the overly textbook version that we want to avoid too.
100%. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I have to comment. I taught Spanish from home, obviously, for the first time, and I walked down once and I introduced vosotros. And then what I typically do in Spanish too is I claim a kid that they're going to study in Spain, and I say, will you learn the vosotros? Because I don't really know it that well. And I came downstairs and my wife was like, do you teach them the vosotros? She was like, you would do that. And I'm like, ¿Cómo estáis? And the other thing, this is something that I've always enjoyed. Like, I prep myself before I'm like, it's camiseta, it's piscina, because I'm going to come out like playera, alberca. I can't do all the Spanish from Spain. So what I do, and the kids love it, is on our vocab list, if I say it, they quickly add it, because that means that they have like 2 options to write, like, on the so it just gives them more options. So then I'll have kids come in and say, like, how they say shirt in Chile, and then they'll be like chaleco, and I'll be like, what, chaleco? And so that's something that's kind of cool too, because obviously depending on where your book is from, I've had a lot of fun with that. And I guess just it's been an interesting time to be a Spanish teacher, teaching over the past 4 years. I would just say that. And I think the other elephant in the room is that Latin America isn't talked about in any other classes. I mean, you go to history, they're not talking about Latin America. Yeah. They're not talking about, the Haitian Rebellion. So I've always been amazed, like, they're not, I mean, you ask kids, like, how many time zones are there? And or the simple way to put it is I always start off the year, I'm like, in Mexico, there's only 6 continents. Which one is missing? And they're like, what? They're like, Antarctica? I'm like, no, they have Antarctica. So I've always liked that, because it's a very interesting, and I hate to tangent, but I always ask them, like, what's North America? What's Central America? What's South America? Is Central America part of North America or South America? They're like, it's separate. I'm like, well, it has to be so much. So I get them to ask their parents. Yeah. And I'm like, we're gonna do this survey tomorrow, see like what continent it's part of, and it's always interesting, because there's just, I don't know, it's interesting what they know or what they don't know or what they think they know in terms of Latin America in general. As Zach said, 21 countries. I mean, when I put up that map at the beginning, they're like, and they're always interested in those 3 countries above Brazil, right? Yeah. We won't talk about those right now. We'll give you a pass on those, but it's interesting.
Great. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Does anyone else have anything to add for those last couple questions?
I will, Sophia.
Okay, yes.
Okay, So y'all can come to my class and learn the vosotros if you like. Y'all can rip on it all you want. I still teach vosotros, but I love it. And so I just wanted to say from before, when you're talking about which like book or curriculum you're using. So I'm using an online curriculum and it's called Voces and Nuestra Historia. And one of the good things about it is that there's lots of listening activities, lots of just everything. But when we have those listening activities, it's native speakers from all different countries. So I love that, and I can incorporate that way. And they're not using the vosotros, of course. And then I just wanted to add for the last question, something I didn't say before. So this year, for the first time, I am doing something called a global learning experience with my 8th graders. And Luke made me think of it when he said someone can be the expert for vosotros. So my 8th graders each have become an expert for one country. And they had sort of a shortened list out of the 21 to choose from. And Guinea Equatorial was one of them. And so in each of my 2 8th grade classes, I have one student who's the expert for that country. And so they're 8th graders, right? So at their level, they have been since December doing some research about that country instead of what I used to do. And I still do this in a sense, but I try to touch on every single one of those countries over the course of my 3 years with these fabulous students. But in 8th grade, I said, you know what? I really want them to go deeper and learn more about one country, you know, and then they can kind of come together and share with each other. And it's sort of a long-term project. And again, it's new. It's the first time I've ever done it. And with Luis's help, I'm going to have my students connect with some of the grad students at Pitt and just connect and have a little bit of a mentor relationship and just say, you know, what's going on in this country? I introduced the Sustainable Development Goals and they grabbed onto one of the top global problems in that country. And so that's what they're looking at. And they're looking at connecting with mostly a nonprofit organization there and looking into the work that they're doing. And so for me, it's about that too. It's not just about be aware, but what are you going to do about it? Now that you know that the students in your expert country have trouble getting clean water, right? Or they don't have access to quality education or whatever the case may be, right? Depending on what their global problem is that they chose. And so I'm in the throes of that right now. You'll have to ask me later how that goes. By the end of May, that will be wrapped up. But I'm just pleased that they are already coming out of these conversations saying, wow, I never knew that before, right? I just never knew that this existed before because they're in their bubble, right? All of them, and just like we were mostly when we were young, we're all in our bubble, especially in middle school, right? Yeah. And so we just don't know what is out there and what the challenges are that much of the rest of the world is facing. And so I feel good that at least I'm exposing them to that. And for some of them, I mean, I have students right now who are saying, I want to be a teacher. I don't know if they want to be a Spanish teacher, but they want to be a teacher of some kind. Yeah. And they were phenomenal when they presented photos from their country. I said, I just sat one of them down. I said, you are definitely going to be a teacher, right? And just being able to encourage them in that has been wonderful.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because it's so true. We don't get any like exposition to Latin America at all in at least definitely middle school, most of high school. So it's really nice to be able to do that and also to give them one country to look deeper to, because that kind of grounds you once you realize that Latin America is so big and there's so much variation and diversity. To have one country to focus on could really help you, I think. Great. So if anyone else has or an answer to one of these questions, you can share it now, but then I want to open for anyone else who has been listening and might have a question. So
can add just one quick thing, Sophia. So just to comment to Nicole, I absolutely, I think that's a great project. Oftentimes when I'm choosing what culture I'm going to teach, I feel like a kid in a candy store because again, you're scratching the surface oftentimes and you don't get to really go deep. So that's awesome that the students have little bit more time to get to know one culture a bit better. But something that I tried, and going back to some things that Luke and Jason were saying, earlier this year, I implemented a choice board for just getting outside and figuring out what culture is around us, because I'm on the opposite end from everyone else here. I've never been to Spain. I did not learn the vosotros. My Spanish teacher in high school put a line there and said, there's a thing that exists and I'm not going to teach you because my husband is from Mexico and I studied in Mexico. And so consequently, I've taught myself the vosotros. So Luke, I'm there with you. I do teach it because I say, I want you to be good global citizens and someday you may study abroad in Spain. But I've been speaking Spanish for 18 years and have gotten quite well without it, and you can be communicable without it. So that is to say, I think that especially in the community where I teach, most of my students, if they have contact with Spanish in the wild, it's going to be with a speaker from Latin America, from Puerto Rico, from the Caribe, from Mexico, from Central America. So I sort of have been doing a survey over the last year and figuring out what businesses are in the area that would be accessible to my kids, what resources the local library has, what books are in Spanish, what authors they're by. And they have to pick some projects and just go out in the community and provide evidence that they did it. So sometimes it's a matter of go in the local Hispanic grocery store and have a conversation with the cashier in Spanish and find out her name and report back. And sometimes I prep people if I think it's going to be polite that, hey, there might be some kids that come in and would you play along with this? But sometimes I don't, and it's organic. We missed the Latin American Studies Festival very much because that was an opportunity for getting out. But again, just connecting them with, this is a language people use every single day, like Jason said, and they use it for all the same reasons that a student would use English. So trying to make those little everyday connections.
Awesome. Yes. Great. Thank you, Sarah. And so if anyone who has been listening has a question, you can ask it now. I'll give you a second to think. In the meantime, I actually just thought of a question while you guys were talking. What do you think about using Spanish names? Like when I was in 7th or 8th grade, everyone like chose a new name. So what do you think about this? Like, is it helpful? Is it harmful? I would love to hear.
I've tried it a couple of times, and I'm in teaching for a long time. I think 1 or 2 years I tried it, and it was fun for the kids. They enjoyed it. That's the name they wrote on their test. I think sometimes I'm apprehensive at the beginning of the year when I just get to know the kids. Like I don't know their real names yet. And then I'll be honest with you, then I just like don't get around to it. I have nothing against it or for it. If the kids like it, they do. And this is silly of me to admit, but like it just slips my mind, because it's more important for me to learn their actual names first. So I think it's fun, but I really have only done it a couple times.
Yeah, Zachary or Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
So I don't have very strong opinions on this, but it's an interesting question that you ask. I got rid of them for the first time this year. When I started at this school, the teacher before me had always made a big deal about giving them their Spanish names. And so I told them that my first 2 years, I said, well, I'm not going to assign you one, but you can pick one if you want, or if you just want to be you, that's fine too. And I might say it in a Spanish way because, sometimes it lends itself well to that if I'm just going on and on and on and I mention you in an example or something. But I thought, the strongest argument for it, at least that I've heard, or for against it, you as a Spanish speaker don't have to have a Spanish name. I grew up in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. So like Jason, in the middle of nowhere, we had zero diversity in my high school. And I had never met anyone other than my Spanish teacher's husband that spoke Spanish in my life. But it wouldn't make him any less of a Spanish speaker if his name weren't Martín. You don't have to have a Spanish name to be a Spanish speaker. So anybody can do this. And so this year I just kind of never mentioned it and the kids never missed it. So it's my experiment.
Nice. Yeah, that's a different way to think about it. I think that's interesting.
I did give them names this year. And so it's been like, it's literally had to memorize like 300 names. But I think the best part of it is that I told them at the beginning of the year, this is your chance to assume a new heart and a new identity, because we do that through learning a language, a new heart and identity.
Mhm.
And also, like, I tell the kids, like, when I go to Puerto Rico and Mexico, like, Diego's coming out. Like, that's a new part of me. I act like a different person when I travel. Like, I'm literally insane, crazy. And then I get back to the US and I'm like quiet and reserved. But no, Diego's coming out. So I told them, you know, when you travel and actually interact with people, you're going to see how you change. And like, you know, Miguel's going to come out.
Cool. That's awesome.
The idea of I remember one time we were interviewing a Spanish teacher, and there was a couple principals there, and one of the things that one of my pet peeves as a Spanish teacher is the infantilization of Spanish and Spanish speaking culture. And by that, I mean, like when the school calendar came out and on May 5th, there's like a little chili pepper with a sarape, and like, I was pissed. Like that cannot be, you have to take that off of there. That's not what, first, it's not even close to what Cinco de Mayo is. And then like a chili pepper with maracas and a sombrero is not what Mexican culture is, right? And so I think sometimes you may risk that with the names. Again, like I don't have a strong opinion on it, and I've done it before. But I remember at this interview, like the one principal was like, "Hola, me llamo David," right? Like they're trying to like make it as if it were, you know, the first day is a Spanish one, and the other one like, "Oh, me llamo Isabel," and then I just look at like, my name's Jason Hank. Because like that's what we're here to do, not be cutesy. And then when we get to the Spanish part of the interview, yo te puedo hablar todo el día en español. Si quieres hablar así, podemos hablar. Y cuando llegamos al momento de medir la capacidad de hablar español, hablamos así. But we don't have to make llamo like that. No, like that. You're kind of making fun of, like you're almost like playing up your American accent, you know. And so that's
Yeah. And also with the names, I teach Spanish speakers English, and you know, I teach one woman named Karen, and she pronounced it like that, Karen. I know some Spanish speakers named Michael, like they pronounce it Michael. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to have a Hispanic.
I like what Sarah said, because you know my brother-in-law's name is John. His name's John, you know, like, and it's spelled John.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I don't have any more questions for you guys. If anyone in the audience has a question, now's the time.
But I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, can you hear me? Is this microphone working?
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys ever thought about teaching outside of the United States, or just always wanted to be a Spanish teacher in the United States?
Yeah. I taught English in Chile, and I taught English in the Mexican University for 2.5 years. And if I could just, in the public Mexican University in the state of Querétaro, which is where my wife's from, everyone that graduates has to get a passing score in the TOEFL. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the TOEFL, but if you're not, take 2 days in your Spanish 3 or above and give them the English TOEFL test, and you'll have a nice conversation about that, because it's 2 people on this record like, I'm kind of tired. Well, do you fancy going for a drink? Not really. And then it's like, what does the person mean? It's crazy. So I can honestly say that through teaching English abroad, first of all, I realized that it is an incredibly complicated language, bar none the pronunciation. But I realized teaching English abroad that I really didn't have any sort of training in doing it. So I think the one thing that I learned about teaching abroad is that I really wanted to come back and learn how to teach, because I think so often people go abroad, and, you know, Japan, if you want to make some money, I would, you know, you go to Japan, you don't typically go to Latin America and teach English. But I think so often we go abroad to teach and it's just like, you're a native speaker, teach English. And then you get to phrasal verbs and you're like, oh, you know, I put up with him. What does that mean? Or my pimple broke out, he broke in. So when my wife was saying like, oh, you know, John and Karen broke, I was like, that's terrible. Where? At the waist, at the arm. She's like, they broke up. I didn't realize we had break in, break out, break up. So just like I'll say, teaching English and teaching abroad in general, it just gives you so much respect for people that are trying to learn a second language. So my advice, if you'd like to teach abroad, and there's international schools where you can go and teach Spanish or teach schools like that. But I think it's a fantastic experience to have, to go abroad, just to feel uncomfortable, to realize what difficulty it is. And then I can say for myself personally, I decided, oh man, if I want to teach this language, being a native speaker isn't going to cut it. I need, you know, there's some training, there's some pedagogy that I'd like to do. But by all means, I'd give it a shot, because I think it's a wonderful way to get involved in a workplace and in other places in another country.
All right, great. Thanks, Peyton. That was a great question.
Thank you for answering that. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you, Luke. Yeah, so if no one else has any more questions, I just want to say thank you so much, guys. Your input is so valuable, especially I know I learned a ton from this. And even if someone doesn't want to become a teacher, I think it's still just super interesting to hear about the impact that you guys are making. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for showing up today. And thank you to everyone who was listening. So I'm going to stop recording.